Can President Donald Trump pardon himself the day before he leaves office? Well, I'm an English lawyer, not a US one, but I've spoken with a lot of American lawyers and looked into this in a lot of detail, and this is your explainer guide on whether a President of the United States can pardon themselves from any crimes they might have committed. Article 2.2 of the US Constitution states, "A president shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offences against the United States, except in cases of impeachment." So is that wide enough for the president to grant a pardon to himself? He certainly claimed to have that power. In a tweet in 2018, he tweeted, "As has been stated by numerous legal scholars, I have the absolute right to pardon myself." In the US, there are two types of crime: federal crimes and state crimes. Most crimes are state crimes, including murder, robbery, arson, rape, and the state decides how these work. It decides the exact form of the offence, it decides the punishment, it decides the legal system, it provides the prosecutor, it provides the state defence aid. Some crimes are federal crimes, for example, those that affect the whole of the United States, like mail fraud, or crimes where the offence actually crosses across a state boundary. For example, if somebody is kidnapped in one state and taken into another state. There, the federal government has jurisdiction. Let's come back to Article 2.2 of the United States Constitution, and you'll remember that the power to pardon vested in the president is to pardon for offences against the United States. In other words, federal crimes. That in turn means that the president has no power to pardon people for state crimes, which are, as I said, the vast majority of crimes. The governor of a state might have the power to pardon for a state crime, but the president doesn't. So let's look at the state crimes that the president is accused of. There are many detailed reports suggesting that he might have committed tax fraud. Of course, no charges have been brought. Nobody knows for definite because he hasn't disclosed his tax records. But at the very minimum, it can be said that state prosecutors are looking into the question of whether President Trump has committed tax fraud very, very carefully. There are also some suggestions of other crimes, including bribery, but investigations are still at a very, very early stage. Bribery is a state crime, and the president cannot pardon himself for that because the president cannot pardon anybody for state crimes. As for federal crimes, he could potentially be charged with obstruction of justice. You'll remember the special investigator Robert Mueller, who laid out detailed investigations and allegations into the impact of Russia interfering in the 2016 presidential election, and Robert Mueller concluded in all but the clearest words that there'd been obstruction by President Trump into his conducting of that investigation. Obstruction of justice is a federal crime, not a state crime. So can the president, using Article 2.2, pardon himself for that federal crime? There's not a clear answer, but the clear balance of opinion is that the president cannot pardon himself. And that's because of a principle of both English and American law, which is that no judge can be a judge in his own case. So if you had a judge in the High Court in England, for example, who was suing his neighbour for trespass, that judge could not be the judge in the case where he himself or she herself is also the litigant. No judge can be a judge in their own case. That seems to support the argument that President Trump could not be the judge in his own case so as to grant himself a pardon. He might be able to grant anybody else a pardon for federal crimes, such as obstruction of justice, but he cannot grant a pardon to himself. Another argument is that the president isn't acting as a member of the judiciary, he's acting as a member of the executive, in fact the person in charge of the executive branch, and so the normal rule that a a person cannot be a judge in their own cause doesn't apply to him. Yet another argument is that where the clear wording of the Constitution crashes against normal legal principles, such as the fact a judge cannot be a judge in their own cause, the wording of the Constitution trumps the normal lower legal principles. But that's not a very good argument, because we're using that legal principle, a man can't be a judge in his own cause, to interpret the Constitution rather than to negate it. In addition, the Constitution is based around the separation of powers, and so there is a basic principle in US constitutional law that somebody cannot be acting both as a member of the executive and as a member of the judiciary at the same time. And since President Trump is exercising, in essence, a judicial function, the power to pardon, he cannot use his executive status as a way of circumventing the rule that he cannot be a judge in his own case. Now, this issue did actually arise before in 1974, when President Richard Nixon sought advice on whether he could pardon himself before he left office as a result of the Watergate scandal. And the advice that was given by his Attorney General was that he couldn't use Article 2.2 to pardon himself. Now, that advice was never tested in the courts because just 4 days after the advice was given, President Richard Nixon resigned, Vice President Gerald Ford became the president, and one of his very first acts in office was to pardon President Nixon, generally regarded as one of the dirtiest backroom deals in senior American recent political history. There's no doubt, following a United States Supreme Court case called Ex parte Garland, that the Supreme Court has the right and the power to actually review the president's decision to grant a pardon to somebody, or indeed himself, on grounds of constitutional principles. So although nothing could actually stop President Donald Trump from physically signing a pardon document, there would be nothing to stop the Supreme Court from reviewing that afterwards and saying that it's unconstitutional. Which way would they jump? Well, nobody really knows. The majority of academic scholars agree with me. No one can be a judge in their own cause, so therefore President Trump cannot pardon himself for federal crimes. The recent appointee to the Supreme Court bench, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, interestingly refused to give an answer to this question when she was asked it during her Senate confirmation hearing. She was specifically asked, can the president pardon himself? And she declined to answer. But as I say, the majority of US legal scholars think that the Supreme Court would come down on the side that the president doesn't have the power to be a judge in his own cause and to issue a pardon for himself under Article 2.2 of the US Constitution for any federal crimes, such as obstruction of justice, that he may have committed. But even if he did have that power, even if the Supreme Court comes down in his favour, there is absolutely nothing that he can do, because Article 2.2 of the Constitution doesn't allow him to do this, to pardon himself for state crimes, including tax evasion and bribery. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe. You can use the subscribe button below, and please also click the notification bell, because then you'll get automatic notifications when I post new videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Barrister Daniel Barnett. Bye-bye.